All right, so you guys just want me to go through and read these comments from people and answer them?
Yeah.
All right, back for another episode of Shop Talk. Here we go. All right, this one's from Freedom Isn't Free 2023. The analogy Pat used for the steel belt and a piston sure has me confused. The oil bath lubrication for the piston is supposed to reduce friction between the two surfaces. This I get. Why exactly are we trying to reduce friction on the steel belt / sheaves? Seems counter to the goal to me. In any case, not a chance in the world I would buy one of these. Hey, great question, Freedom Isn't Free 2023. This is one that's come up a few times. So my point in making the analogy was to try to indicate to people that the two metal surfaces of the belt and the sheave aren't actually touching one another, that there's a film of oil between them to keep those two things from wearing out. The oil that's used in the steel drive transmission is actually a very specially formulated oil, and it's got additional friction modifiers in it that actually help that belt and clutch face ride against one another without any slip. So it's not the same as a conventional motor oil, but the idea that you get an oil film between the metal belt and the metal sheave is similar in both applications. But again, the oil in the steel drive transmission is very special to this particular style of transmission. So when you get to those 6,000 mile oil changes, make sure you buy the right oil for this transmission. All right, this one is from Mike Sukes. This is a dumb idea. Just have a clutch and a 6-speed with reverse. Well, Mike, there's a reason we didn't end up doing that on the Ranger XD 1500. And the goal, one of the goals of this steel drive transmission was to get extremely good slow speed drivability, especially in off-road and technical terrains. So think of times like towing a trailer, going up a grade, maybe rock crawling, getting into the mud, where you need to be able to slowly move those tires and see what you're doing and not have to have a lot of extra coordination and thought. Clearly there are spots where that type of transmission works fine when you're going high speed and having fun. But when you think about a lot of the work applications in a Ranger, especially with this extreme duty version, that slow speed drivability that the steel drive brings is a big part of the reason that we chose this style of transmission versus a standard manual with a clutch pedal. All right, this question comes from Clayton8465. Clayton says, it should make 150 horsepower. Polaris can easily make 50 horsepower per 500 cc's. Well, Clayton, thanks for the question. As a Razor guy, I'm true to your heart. Clearly, we have plenty of applications of engines that are making 50 horsepower per half a liter. But for this Ranger application, we actually wanted to bring the noise levels down and the RPM level down. So if you look at the top speed of this engine, it hovers right around 6,500 versus maybe a Razor application you're thinking of that's closer to 8,000 or 8,500, where we're really spinning that motor out to build that horsepower. The other thing that this engine was tailored for is, a lot of low speed work, low grunt, low torque application. So that's really why the power was tailored on the Ranger to be able to match the steel drive transmission and perform, a lot of down low, really low engine speed, quiet operation for working. Hey, this one comes in from John Doe GM5UX. 50 grand? You guys have lost your mind. Well, John Doe, I'm here to tell you, the Ranger XD 1500s actually start at $29,999, just like the one that's sitting behind me in the shop today. So not all of them are, the highest end North Star Cruise. You can actually get into the Ranger XD 1500 for just under 30 grand. And keep in mind, we still build plenty of Rangers that are much less expensive than that. Frankly, we still sell a lot of models, that are between, 12 and 15,000 here in the US. And other ones that range between that price and what the Ranger XD 1500s go for. Hey, this one comes from Nibot KRAM 7743. What a complexity nightmare. No opt unity for failure, which I believe is supposed to read more opportunity for failure. And this is in regard to the steel drive transmission. Absolutely, there is more complexity than a mechanical rubber belt that you see on other Ranger models. But really, that's there to provide increased longevity, durability, and features to the guy or gal that ends up owning one of these. So you get things like the tow haul mode, you get the extended intervals on servicing, like the 6,000 mile oil changes on the transmission. So yes, a little more complexity, but overall, that's actually to increase the durability of the steel drive transmission. This one comes in from Ford Mud. Hopefully you guys did better than the automotive world. Those didn't take any kind of abuse or spirited driving. Otherwise, this is just going to be a much more expensive way to change the belt. Yes, we did a much better job than the early automotive steel belt CVTs with the Polaris steel drive and the Ranger XD 1500. All right, this one comes in from Cape Cod CNC. World's worst transmission design. Ask any Honda, Subaru, or other car owner with a CVT in over 60,000 miles. Been a mechanic since the 70s, and I have never seen such a high failure rate across the board by all manufacturers, especially in stop and go conditions. They only exist because they're dirt cheap to make and last long enough for the warranty to expire. Then you're stuck with a very expensive repair. So, Cape Cod CNC, few things we've done on this Ranger to be able to address the concerns that you've got. First one is that we put a huge cooler up on the front of this Ranger. So this is an oil lubricated and cooled transmission, and we've got a giant cooler that we showed in the video up front. And that is really one of the big things that's going to help keep that transmission cool. So when you think about those stop and go applications or work applications or big towing with the huge 3,500 pound capacity, some of those earlier examples that you are maybe referring to didn't have that level of cooling capability, so they weren't able to withstand that type of driving behavior. Next one that we've got is additional electronic controls. So when you look at the earlier steel belt CVTs that maybe exist in the world, a lot of those were very mechanically centric or didn't have advanced electronics. We've taken the learnings from some of those earlier issues that other manufacturers had, and we've put them into this Ranger so that we can use those controls to keep those vehicles out of harmful conditions, to actually extend the longevity and durability of the vehicle. So overall, even though there may be some applications in the world that weren't the most reliable, I think there's a lot more today that are very reliable. Frankly, there's vehicles people don't even realize that have automatics that use similar technology. But with the huge cooling and advanced electronics, we're confident that this is going to be a very durable transmission in the Ranger application. Hey, this one comes in from RC4X437. Does that mean that a clutch tune is no longer springs and weights, but a tune that is flashed to the computer similar to an engine tune? Example, going to fuel injection from Mcardle. Yes. All right, this one comes in from Eric Lassard 5021. Eric writes, I see a lot of burn transmission in the future without low gear. So Eric, there's actually a few things going on the Ranger XD 1500 that should help avoid that scenario. First one we talked about is the huge cooler on the transmission. So that's going to flow tons of oil, keep that oil cool. Next one is that we've got a starting clutch that oil is actually cooling down, that's electronically controlled. So when you think about things like tow haul mode, towing a 3,500 pound trailer, we can actually make sure that transmission isn't getting damaged with those electronic controls in that starting clutch. The other thing that's maybe not obvious at first glance is that the gear ratio is selected to be kind of between a normal Ranger high and low, but the overall spread on the CVT is actually bigger. So when you start out, you're kind of starting at a deeper ratio, and when it winds out, it's actually at a taller ratio. So we can actually use the gear selection plus the wider CVT ratio and the steel drive, along with the electronically controlled starting clutch and the huge cooler, all to make a really durable vehicle that only needs one forward gear. All right, this next one comes in from Smitty0655 Abel. Why no unitized hubs in the front? I like it though. So, Smitty, you are correct. We've got unitized hubs in the back, and those are really to handle the load carrying and work capability of the Ranger XD 1500. So where we've got the ability to have a 3,500 pound trailer on the back or 1,500 pounds in the bed, we actually need the durability of the unitized hub in the back, whereas the front doesn't see those types of loads, so we don't actually need that. Same basic setup as the Polaris Expedition, where we've got unitized hubs in the rear and standard wheel bearings pressed in the front. All right, this one comes in from Dirty Money 05. They will do anything except make a DCT transmission. Well, for those of you out there that don't know what a DCT transmission is, that stands for dual clutch transmission. Some people just call them a dual clutch. And really the way that works is on a normal sequential, you've got two different shafts. Usually there's only one clutch, and you have shift dogs that are shuttling gears back and forth. On a dual clutch, you basically have one shaft that's got half the gears, one shaft that's got the other half. And you basically have one clutch that's engaged, one clutch that's disengaged. That transmission has to predict what the next gear is that you want to go into, and then it opens one clutch and closes the next one for that gear shift to happen. So the problems that exist on that we don't like, which we do like about the steel drive, is that you do have some amount of torque interruption in that gear change. So you still pull back on torque on the engine, whereas the steel drive, like most CVTs, can ride up on the torque peak and really hold you there. So you don't ever feel that torque interruption and power delivery. The other thing in the shifting is that we don't have the shift dogs that you'd have in a standard sequential or a DCT in the steel drive. It's actually hydraulic circuits that allow you to go between forward and reverse. So when you think about work applications like plowing, where you're always moving direction changes quite frequently, you don't have to worry about wear on that shift mechanism because it's all hydraulically driven on the steel drive. The other thing that is really nice about the steel drive transmission is that you don't have to worry about gear selection. So on a DCT, because you're always forward predicting a gear, on an acceleration, when you're off a starting line, it's really easy, right? You start in first, you know you're going to go to second next. But when you're in those middle gears, you aren't always sure whether the guy's going to, push down on the throttle for going faster, or maybe needs a downshift because they're coming into a corner. So the one thing that can happen on a DCT that's a little different than a sequential is that you can actually be predicting the wrong gear and then have to basically shift the transmission and then actuate the clutches, whereas the steel drive doesn't do that. It operates near seamlessly and flawlessly, so whether you're accelerating up to speed or getting on the brakes to slow down, it always holds that engine right where you need it for that smooth, easy to understand power delivery that's very consistent, easy to operate, and super good for work application, especially when you think about some of the modes we've got, like the tow haul, where you can tow 3,500 pounds behind this Ranger. Hey, this one comes in from Scribble OG. Did they give you more legroom because I'm tall and don't like sitting sideways so my knees aren't in the dash? Hey, we have a whole video on comfort where my good buddy Chris goes in depth on the interior and seating. And yes, I'm 6'6", I fit with inches to spare in front of my knees. Good buddy Aaron, who's 5'20" or 6'8", even he fits in this without his knees up into the dash. So tons of space on the Ranger XD, even for those of you out there who are tall with long legs. This one comes in from John Powers Drives. Are these guys brothers? LOL, they look so similar. Well, John, Chris and I both have beards. We both work at Polaris, but unfortunately for you, we are not related. Hey, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Shop Talk, where I'm sitting in the hot seat. Really want to say thanks to everybody that spent the time watching through the full videos and posting some comments and questions. We are reading through them. We're listening to what everybody has to say. Not always the easiest comments to read on our side, but we certainly want to hear what people are thinking so that we can take that feedback as we go forward on future product development. So be sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and you never know. Your comments might show up in a future episode of Shop Talk if we see something that piques our interest. Thanks.